Hello, this is Mr. Daniels, and we are reading Rogue Wave, a short story by Theodore Taylor. A killer wave, known to mariners as a rogue wave, was approaching a desolate area of Baja California below Ensenada. It had been born off the east coast of Australia during a violent storm. It had traveled almost 7,000 miles at a speed of 20.83 miles an hour, driven by an unusual pattern of easterly winds. It was a little over 800 feet in length and measured about 48 feet from the bottom of its trough to its crest. On its passage across the Pacific, it had already killed 13 people, mostly fishermen in small boats, but also an entire French family of 5 aboard a 48-foot schooner. Melissa Scoot Atkins went below into the old Sea Dog's tiny galley, moving down the 3 area steps of the companionway, closing 2 solid entry doors behind her. Always a good idea in offshore sailing. The 3 horizontal hatchboards that were on top of the doors were also firmly in place, securing the 30-foot Baba type against sudden invasion of seawater. Rogues and sneakers have been around since the beginning of the oceans, and the earliest sea literature makes note of giant waves. The U.S. Navy Manual Practical Methods for Observing and Forecasting Ocean Waves says, in any wave system, after a long enough time, an exceptional high one will occur. These monstrous, outsized waves are improbable, but still possible in the exact time of the occurrence and can never be predicted. Naval hydrography studies indicate that waves 15 to 25 feet high qualify for sneaker or sleeper status. The freak rogue is up to 100 feet or over. As waters slowly warm, they seem to be occurring more frequently. In 1995, the Queen Elizabeth II, QE2, the great British passenger liner, encountered a 95-foot rogue south of Newfoundland. More than 900 feet long, the QE2 rode over it, but her captain said it looked like they were sailing into the white cliffs of Dover. Sullivan Atkins, Scoot's oldest brother, was steering the cutter-rigged boat on a northerly course about 15 miles off Cabo Calumet, south of Ensenada. Under a brilliant sun, the glittering blue Pacific rose and fell in long, slick swells, and a light cold breeze holding steady. Below deck, Scoot was listening to Big Sandy and his Fly Ride boys doing Swinging West and singing along with them, while slicing leftover snake from last night's meal. They grilled it on the small charcoal ring that was mounted outboard on the starboard side at the stern, trailing sparks into the water. The Sea Dog had every blessed thing, including a barbecue pit, she marveled. Scoot was learning how to be a deep sea water sailor. She was 14 years old and pretty, with dark hair. Though small in size, not even 5 feet, she was strong. She started off with 8-foot sabots. On this trip, her first aboard the Sea Dog, she maneuvered the wheel for almost 3 days they'd been underway. She stood 4 watches a night. Sully was a good teacher. It was one of those perfect days to be out, Sully thought. The 3 dark-on sails, belayed and whispering, white bow waves singing pleasant songs as the fiberglass hull, tilting to starboard, sliced through the ocean. It was a day filled with goodness, peace, and beauty. They'd come south as far as Cabo Calumet, turning back north only an hour ago. They'd sailed from Catalina Island's Avalon Harbor, the Sea Dog's home port, out into the channel of Los Angeles. Sully had borrowed the boat from a family friend, Bo Tucker, a stockbroker with enough money to outfit it and maintain it properly. Built by Tai Shing of Taiwan, she was heavy and sturdy with teakwood deck and handsome teakwood interior and the latest in navigation equipment. Sully had sailed her at least a dozen times. He'd been around boats, motor and sail, for many of his 19 years. He thought the old Sea Dog was the best, in her category, that he'd ever piloted. As he was about to complete a northeast tack, Sully's attention was drawn to a squadron of seagulls diving on small fish about 100 yards off the port bow. and he did not see the giant wave that had crept up silently behind the Sea Dog. But a split second before it lifted the boat like a carpenter's chit, he sensed something behind him and glanced backward toward the towering wall of shining water. It was already too late to shout a warning to Scoot so she could escape from the cabin, too late to do anything except hang on to the wheel with both hands, too late to even pray. He did manage to yell as the Sea Dog became vertical. She rose up to the surface of the wall, stern first, then pitch-pulled violently, end over end, the bow submerging, and the boat going upside down, taking Sully and Scoot with it, the 40-foot mast, sails intact, now pointing toward the bottom. Scoot was hurled upward, legs, arms flying, her head striking after the galley bulkhead from the companionway steps in the interior deck, which was now the ceiling. She instantly blacked out. Everything loose in the cabin was scattered around, and what had been overhead, water was pouring in, which was soon lapping at Scoot's chin. It was coming from a 4-inch porthole that had not been docked securely, and a few other smaller points of entry. Scully's feet were caught under the forestay sailcloth, plastered around his face. But when he managed to shove clear and swim upward, breaking water, he looked at the mound of the upside-down hole, bottom to the sky, unable to believe that the fine, sturdy Sea Dog had been flipped like a cork, perhaps trapping Scoot inside. Treading water, trying to collect his thoughts, he yelled, "Scoot!" But there was no answer. Heart pounding, unable to see over the mound of the hole, he circled it, thinking she might have been thrown clear, but there was no sign of her. He swam back to the point of cabin entry, took several deep breaths, and then dove. He felt a long hatch in the boards and opened his eyes briefly to see that the doors were still closed. She was still inside. Maneuvering his body, he pulled on the handles. The doors, they were jammed, and he returned to the surface for air. He knew by the way the boat already had settled that there was water inside her. Under usual circumstances, the hole being upright, there would be 4 feet, 9 inches of hole below the waterline. There would be about the same to the cabin overhead, enabling a 6-foot person to walk down there. Panting, blowing, Sully figured there was at least a 3-foot air pocket holding the Sea Dog on the surface, and if Scoot hadn't been knocked unconscious and drowned, she could live for quite a while in the dark chamber. How long, he didn't know. And the blackness of water continued to lap at Scoot's chin. She had settled against what had been the deck of the galley alcove, her body in an upright position on debris. Everything not tied down or in a locker was now between the overhead ribs. Wooden hatch covers from the bilges were floating in the water, and the naked bilges were exposed. Just aft her body, and now above it, was the small diesel engine, as well as the batteries. Under the water were cans of oil, some of them leaking. Battery acid might leak too. Few sailors could imagine the nightmare that existed inside the Sea Dog. Scoot's pretty face was splashed with engine oil. Over the next 5 or 6 minutes, Sully dove repeatedly, using his feet as a fulcrum, and all the strength that he had in his arms and legs and back in an effort to open the doors. The pressure of the water defeated him. Then he thought about trying to pry the door open with the wooden handle of the scrub brush. Too late for that, he immediately discovered. It had drifted away, along with Scoot's nylon jacket, her canvas boat shoes, anything that could float. Finally, he climbed on top of the keel, catching his breath, resting a moment, trying desperately to think of a way to enter the hole. Boats of the Baba class, built for deep sea water sailing, quite capable of reaching Honolulu and beyond, were almost sea-tight, unless the sailors made a mistake, or unless the sea became angry. The side ports were supposed to be dogged and securely in the open ocean. Aside from the cabin doors, there was no entry into that cabin without tools. He couldn't very well claw a hole through the inch of tough fiberglass. He thought about the hatch on the foredeck, but it could only be opened from inside the cabin. Then there was the skylight on top of the 17-foot cabin used for ventilation as well as a sun source. That butterfly window, hinged in the middle, could be opened only from the inside. Even with his scuba gear, he couldn't open that skylight unless he had tools. He fought back tears of frustration. There was no way to reach Scoot, and he knew what would happen down there. The water would slowly and inevitably rise, and the air pocket was only 6 inches. Her head would be trapped between the surface and the water and the dirty bilge. The water would torture her. Then it would drown her. Seawater has no heart, no brain. The sea dog would then drop to the ocean floor, thousands of feet down, entombing her forever. Maybe the best hope for poor Scoot was that she was already dead, but he had to determine whether she was still alive. He began pounding on the hole at the bottom of his fist, waiting for a return knock. At the same time, he shouted her name over and over. Nothing but silence from inside there. He wished he'd hung on to that silly scrub brush. The wooden handle would make more of a noise than the flesh of his fist. Almost half an hour passed, and finally he broke down and sobbed. His fist was bloody from the constant pounding. Why hadn't he gone below to make the stupid sandwiches? Scoot would have been at the wheel when the wave grasped the sea dog. His young sister, with all her life to live, would be alive now. They'd had a good brother-sister relationship. He'd teased her a lot about being pint-sized, and she teased back, holding her nose when he brought home one girl or another home for display. She'd always been spunky. He'd taken her sailing locally in the Channel, but she'd wanted an offshore cruise for her 14th birthday. Now, she'd found one, unfortunately. Their father had nicknamed her Scoot because as a baby she'd crawled so fast. It was still a fitting name for her as a teenager. With a wiry body, she was fast in tennis and swimming, and already the school's champion in the 100-yard dash. Eyes closed, teeth clenched, heart pounding away with the bloody fist, he finally went back to the ocean to try once more to open the doors. He sucked air, taking a half-dozen deep breaths, and then dove again. Bracing his feet against the companionway frames, he felt every muscle straining, but the doors remained jammed. He was now aware that if they did open, more water would rush in. He might not be able to have time to find Scoot in the blackness and pull her out. But he was willing to take the gamble. Scoot awakened as the water seeped into her mouth and nose. For a moment, she could not understand where she was, how she got there, what had happened. Vaguely, she remembered the boat slanting steeply upward as if she were suddenly diving, and she remembered her body going up. But that's all she remembered. And she knew at the moment that she had had the fierce headache and was in the chill of the water in total darkness. It took a little longer to realize that she was trapped in the Sea Dog's cabin by the galley alcove. She began to feel around herself and touch floating things. The air was thick with an oil smell. She ran her hand over the nearest solid thing, a bulkhead. That's strange, she thought. Her feet were touching a pot. She lifted her right arm and felt above her. The galley range? The galley range above her? The boat was upside down. She felt for the companionway steps and found the entry doors and pushed on them. And that was the way she'd come in. The doors didn't move.